Read through Amanda's email 2 or 3 times, then sit and stare at your computer for a while the memory of that uncomfortable conversation makes you feel newly embarrassed and self-conscious. Part of you is also encouraged by the fact that she cared enough to get back to you at all. Sitting in front of your computer, you start to question things like whether or not Amanda sent you the number out of pity or perhaps some sense of obligation. After having listened to you, you question her motives and the validity of her concern and whether or not you think seeing a therapist would even be helpful. Yet almost unconsciously you reach for your phone, and before you realise what's happening, you're listening to the therapist line ring. Before you can bring yourself to hang up, you're listening to the slightly clinical but not unpleasant voice of the receptionist ask how she can help you. I'd like to make an appointment with the doctor, you manage to stammer out. The conversation is quick and not nearly as unpleasant as you were fearing, and quicker than you can say Freudian slip, you've scheduled an appointment. Quicker than you realise, appointment day rolls around. What do? Let's go. You have your first session with your new therapist, Dr. Susan Melville, a tall woman in her mid-40s with a disarming demeanour and patient eyes with the start of the slightest smile lines. She makes you feel uncomfortable fairly easily, which is a pleasant surprise after all your anxiety over the appointment. As you leave, you make a second appointment. You're still sceptical about all of this, but figure you might as well see where this goes. The hardest part, it seems, was taking your first step. You're still not sure if and how you're going to tell your family or your partner, but you'll figure out you'll deal with that when the time comes. Either way, you feel relieved that you managed to see this through instead of being paralysed with worry over it. Even if nothing comes out of it, you did something you said you would instead of flaking out and running away. You're emotionally exhausted when you get home and collapse into bed. You sleep better that night than you have in a week, and you're not sure of it because you were so tired when you got home, or if it's because of the therapist. Okay. Wednesday. Lately you've developed a nasty habit of waking up 10 to 20 minutes before your alarm rings, and unfortunately today is no exception. You lay in bed each minute, ticking closer and closer to wake up time, and passing on a swelling wave of ever-enriching dread. Sooner than you would like, your alarm blares with caustic inevitability. You frantically pound the snooze button and then retreat under your blankets as if the warmth of your comforter can shield you from the passage of time. You almost always have difficulty rising from bed, but today the simple task seems nothing short of Herculean. After several snooze cycles, you decide that you just can't deal with work today. You're incapable of even rousing yourself from bed, let alone going into work and having to force yourself through a work day. Not to mention, you've snoozed so many times that it would be impossible to make it in on time now anyway. Go to work anyway. In spite of the fact that your body is actively fighting you literally every step of the way, you somehow manage to drag yourself out of bed and make your way into work. Surprisingly, you end up only about 5 minutes late and nobody seems to notice or care. Though when you woke up, the simple act of being even physically present at your job seemed like an impossibility, you're surprised at your own ability to push on through the day. While you are far from enjoying, or indeed even really coping with the dreariness of your job today, you seem to have slipped into a trance-like state of automation, and time is nevertheless passing. Eventually the end of the day rolls around and you head home, utterly exhausted but at the same time almost proud of yourself for having stuck it out. "2 a.m. on Sunday and you have work in the morning. You roll over to see the sickly green glow of the time displayed on your LED alarm clock and let out an exasperated sigh. You've been trying to fall asleep for over 3 hours now, to no avail. Every time your head hits the pillow, you're overcome with anxious thoughts that wrap themselves around each other. Worries about your job lead to worries about your future, lead to worries about your very identity, and you're unable to shake them off long enough to doze off. Your eyes won't even stay shut as your mind races through imagined scenarios going horribly wrong, which you promptly attribute to your general worthlessness. Oh, nice. Your thoughts run too fast for you to come to a satisfying conclusion on any of them. Your room is completely silent, but the silence has given way to a loud static noise rattling around inside your head. Your heart beats loudly and you worry it's beating a little too fast. You worry that if you focus strongly on your racing heart, you'll freak yourself out hard enough that you have a heart attack. You have to be awake for a few for work in a mere 8 hours, and you know that work is so much worse than only a few hours sleep. But we only have the option to not sleep. I would have made a hot chocolate, but hey ho. You get out of bed and head to your desk. Laying in bed with nothing but your thoughts to keep you company makes you feel like you're going insane. The harshness of the light coming from the screen makes you squint as you turn it on, despite how often you find yourself in this exact situation. There have been so many nights lately just like this. As you begin reading a news story, an online friend of yours IMs you. You're up late again, I see. Yeah, can't sleep again. Thinking too much. You guessed it. Want to talk about it? You end up talking with Attic for quite some time about how you've been feeling. He's always been easy to talk to about personal matters, and the added security of talking online helps. Being able to rethink what you say as you type it out and check it before you send it helps you gather your thoughts, and you find it less intimidating in a way to type it all into a prompt and say it out loud. I don't want to be that guy who thinks they can diagnose something because I read a Wikipedia article, but it kind of sounds like you might have depression. You should talk to someone about that, like a doctor. You pause. Are you really that transparent, or is it that you've gotten used to talking about your feelings at this point? If someone new makes you a little paranoid, but you shake it off. We could do some research and see if there's a good doctor near you. It's not like you're going back to sleep anytime soon anyway. Might as well do something while you're awake. Well, we'll say we have talked to someone about it, because that's true. Okay, I'm glad you're taking that step. I've heard it's not an easy one. I know people kind of suck at understanding this sort of stuff sometimes, but there's nothing wrong with having depression. You wouldn't be ashamed to have bronchitis or something, so there's no reason to be ashamed if it's your brain that's sick instead. That's nice of him. You spend a few more minutes talking with Attic about your therapy and your feelings about it. He's incredibly supportive, and you're happy to find that you have a confidant that understands your illness and is willing to lend an ear when you're having nights like this. A little while later, you fall back into bed, kitten in tow, and find it easier to drift off to sleep. Even in therapy, you know you're going to have nights like this sometimes. It's good to know you have a friend who will help carry you through them. It's a chilly Thursday night and you've just gotten off work. This has felt like one of the longest days you've faced in recent memory. Even though nothing exceptional has happened, a ton of minor things kept going wrong, and co-workers have tried your patience throughout the day. You considered leaving work early, but the last thing you wanted to do was deal with your insufferable boss on top of everything else. You're lost in thought on the commute home, and your feelings of frustration both with your life and the world around you build as you run into minor annoyances, like someone bumping into you really hard as they walk by. By the time you get home, you're exhausted, and remember that these feelings were ones you identify as a negative feedback loop with your therapist. These pent-up feelings aren't dying down, and they're eating at you. You open your front door and stare at your apartment. An overwhelming feeling of exhaustion overcomes you, and you feel like your energy levels are low enough that you'll likely settle into a single activity tonight. Reach out to someone. Your head feels too noisy and you need to trade it for some actual conversation. Your therapist did say that it was important to reach out to your support network, so you might as well give it a shot. Who do you call? Alex. You dial Alex, who picks up after only 2 rings. You ask if she has time to talk, and she tells you she's just hanging around in her PJs and is actually somewhat bored for once due to being caught up on her coursework. You try to figure out where to start with how you're feeling and are overcome with missing her face. You ask if she feels like grabbing some dinner, and you notice her barely contained surprise and delight on the other end of the line. You meet about half an hour later at an inexpensive diner not far from your apartment. While the food isn't great, you're surprised by how much your mood seems to have elevated just by being in her company. While at first you were extremely hesitant to talk about your job situation for fear of being burdensome or sounding like a whiner, you see her listening intently to you with what even to you seems to be genuine concern. After winding down with a beer, you cautiously open up a little bit more about your feelings surrounding your job and how drained it leaves you feeling. How you feel like you're simply existing, sending days of your life for no real purpose. You surprise even yourself when you start talking about how frustrated and stymied you feel by your job. About how you used to feel passionately about things, but it feels like all your energy and capacity for creativity is getting leached out of you each and every workday. You can't remember how long it's been since you've externalised this much raw emotion. The two of you spend several hours in the diner booth long after you've half-eaten food was cleared and the waitress stopped refilling your coffee cups. As you get up to leave, a sudden wave of self-consciousness washes over you and you suddenly feel incredibly awkward. Then Alex stands up and grabs you tightly around your waist. You realise that, short of boring her with your seemingly endless rants, she's simply happy to have gotten a chance to spend time with you, real time with you. It's been, by all accounts, incredibly too long since you've allowed yourself to open up to them like this, and there's an almost palpable feeling of closeness you allow yourself to hold on to as you go to bed that night. It's an utterly nondescript Wednesday afternoon, the type of afternoon that would completely fade from memory unless one made an active effort to preserve it. As has become routine on Wednesdays, you are sitting on the couch in Dr. Melville's office. To your mild surprise, she begins this session by breaking her characteristic therapist silence and begins speaking up right away. I wanted to start by saying I think it's great you decided to come see me. It's an incredibly important first step, she begins. I wanted to take some time today to talk about the possibility of supplementing or substituting your treatment with medication. The mention of medication makes your ears perk up and you feel your heart rate increasing. Many people find adding a pharmacological element to their treatment to be very helpful, and some even prefer to take drugs, completely eliminating their need to visit a therapist at all. I don't think that's true. I think drugs are supposed to help numb the extreme feelings while you're having therapy to deal with those things, but whatever. I would prefer if we kept talking should you choose to start medication so that I can monitor your progress and adjust as needed, but the choice is ultimately yours. I just wanted to run the option by you to gauge what your thoughts on the matter might be. Yeah. Accept it and augment it. You think the matter over long and hard. It's strange to think that recently none of this sort of thing was even on your radar, and how you are now being asked to make a decision about it. You're both sceptical and nervous, still getting over the initial shock of even just talking to a therapist. Still, over the years you've done enough entry-level reading on the subject to know if it doesn't help, at least it probably won't hurt, right? After an intense and protracted period of internal vacillation, you decide to bite the bullet and go for it. You tell Dr. Melville that you'd like to try medication in addition to your therapy, and you spend half an hour going over what you'll be taking and what you should expect from it. Thinking back on the decision later, you're pretty sure you had your fist tightly clenched the whole way through. Wednesday evening, and you're visiting your parents' house for a holiday. It's one of the handful of times during the year you drive out to visit your old hometown, and you've seen random people you were gone to school with around town. Whenever bumping into them, the usual short versions of what you've done since graduating are exchanged. You've gone through a few of these today and have been aware of how much you feel you haven't accomplished. When you were in high school, you had much larger plans, and you feel like you failed to manifest most of them. Even if you had managed to, you've largely lost interest in what you thought you wanted to do growing up. Now, you're not really sure what you want to do, and you felt like you're lacking the ambition or drive to figure it out. Everyone you've caught up with seems so much happier than you, like they've got their lives all figured out, and you've been kind of feeling like a failure by comparison. Your brother Malcolm arrives with his wife in tow shortly before you all sit down to dinner. He's been travelling for his job lately, and you haven't seen him since the day he picked you up from the dentist. Your parents haven't seen him since before then. During dinner they all catch up, and Malcolm talks about the amazing things he's done on the road. Your mother turns to you and asks what you've been up to since you've seen them last. Oh, same old, nothing new really going on. Your mother makes a face. Oh, nothing new? How long are you planning on staying at that job of yours? What do you say? Admit you don't know what to do.